Hey, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Hey, great to be here, Patrick. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, for the audience out there who is not familiar with your work just yet, would you mind telling them a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
So I am what's called a detoxinician, and that is a glorified name for the work I do is detoxination. The program that we developed over, I think, 36 years in occupational medicine started off as sauna detoxification using niacin. In fact, that's the name of the book. So our book is sauna detoxification using niacin, following the recommended protocol of Dr. David E. Root. Now, my father actually pioneered this program for occupational medicine, but it had its origins in the drug addiction rehabilitation, world. And so he repurposed it for occupational medicine because he was dealing with patients that were presenting with chemical exposures. Now, we can circle back to that background story because he's got a really fascinating background. But from my perspective, today I've brought this to the public with the publishing of that book. And so the people who really want to take advantage of the best detoxification program out there can buy the book and learn how it's done. But I recommend people do work with me because there's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of conditions and things that we do deal with that I can tailor the program for. But it's a very exciting program. And in fact, at 60 years old, I feel like a healthy 30-year-old because I've been doing this program since 1986.
Wow, that's incredible. So, I feel like detoxification is a word that people probably throw around a lot, but in your own words, like how would you define it?
Well, that's why we actually trademarked the word detoxination. Detoxification tends to be associated with drug addiction and alcohol rehabilitation. So, what we did was we took the detoxification and decontamination and took the first part and the last part and combined them and made detoxination. And so it does differentiate us a little bit, but still we're doing detoxification and it can be used for drug addiction. In fact, cravings are the main reason why people fall off the wagon. In fact, this kind of leads into the problem that we're experiencing with toxins in the world today. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of
Sure.
give some background there. There's over 100,000 chemicals known, in an industry right now, and at least 4,000 a year are being added. So that number is probably already obsolete. But the thing is that out of those 100,000 chemicals that we do know of, less than 10% have been actually tested for human safety. And even out of that, only 1% have been tested in combinations, which is actually a bigger problem. Now, people tend to fixate on heavy metals and thinking that, those are the big problem. And although they are, the reality is that there's a lot more chemicals out there that are known to cause cancer. And in fact, I live in California where we have Prop 65, and Prop 65 has warnings on products that have chemicals known to the state of California to cause cancer, birth defects, or other reproductive harm. And with over 900 chemicals on there, you can pretty much assume that there's a lot more than that that have not actually been fully tested. So these chemicals, once they get into the body, they actually cause a lot of damage. And most people probably don't really understand. I think your audience probably would, but mitochondria, are needed for ATP or adenosine triphosphate energy. And what happens when these cells get, toxic with these? In fact, they're lipophilic toxins, which means they're fat attractive, they're fat soluble. And so when the liver can't process them, because the liver's never dealt with most of these man-made chemicals or synthetic,
Sure.
so, or the metals that should never be injected into the body or inserted into the body. So these heavy metals and chemicals are foreign to the body. The liver has no clue how to deal with them, so they wind up being sequestered in fat because they're lipophilic, they're fat attracted. And once they get into the fat, what happens is they actually cause oxidative stress to the mitochondria, and there's about six other actual mechanisms that they disrupt in the cells. Now, ATP production, for those who don't really understand that, that is the adenosine triphosphate energy that we need to do anything that we're doing. And the fat cells are basically the fuel cells, and they do have mitochondria that also produce ATP, but the triglycerides in that fat need to be broken down into their component parts, which is one glycerol and three fatty acids per triglyceride, and there's millions of them. So they actually are the fuel source for the mitochondria. And by the way, there's enzymes and proteins that you can kind of assume are the guy who pumps the fuel into the mitochondria to help them actually do this ATP production. But when the fat is toxic, it actually causes the disruption of the mitochondria to be able to produce that ATP. And so what we see is what the literature is finally reporting on is that mitochondrial dysfunction is the target of, or I should say, mitochondrial dysfunction is the root cause of many diseases that are non-communicable and non-genetic. So there's a lot more to how this works. I will say that when the free fatty acids leave the fat cell to go populate other cells that produce ATP energy, that's where the free fatty acids are coming out of the fat cells. There's a little bit of siphoning effect going on where you're releasing some of these fat stored toxins back into circulation. So like with drug addiction, the drug residues that are stored in the fat come back into circulation and re-stimulate the dopamine receptors, which then causes these cravings. So that's why this protocol was always so much more successful for drug addiction. And in fact, if you look at the drug addiction, the conventional mechanisms of it, you'll see about a 21% success rate on a good day. Whereas with this program, it was getting 75% success. And so the fact that it was working so well and the fact that it was using sauna is what got my father's attention for putting this into occupational medicine. So this is a little bit of a background, but there's a lot more to that story. And I'll let you go ahead and chime in because I've been kind of hogging the floor here.
No, please. I mean, it is really fascinating. I think there is definitely more people that are aware of toxins in our environment and trying to avoid them for different situations, right? I think it's honestly unbelievable how many are not tested and how we have no idea the impacts of these toxins in our body. If you go into any building in California, it seems like there's that Prop 65 notice on the wall that tells you there's being in that building is going to cause cancer or whatever. So it seems like it's natural that there's going to be a reaction to all these new chemicals that are being produced in the modern world, that we have to have a way to combat that. And it seems like something that's been just completely overlooked by modern medicine. You never see that being reported. So I find that, it seems like this has been a long time coming, and I'm surprised this isn't already more popular.
Exactly. Well, you've got to consider in today's world, the only literature that talks about how to detox chemicals is the literature we've put there. We've done approximately 15 studies over the past 3 decades of occupational medicine. And my father retired in 2019, by the way. So I've been working with the public with this program since then. But the fact is that as far back as the 60s, my father was dealing with this problem because in the military, he was a United States Air Force pilot and physician, which was a very unique role for most people. I mean, there was only 10 of them in the military at the
Wow.
time. And his job was in-flight medical research. Now, that was after several years of interesting posts that, as a kid growing up, were quite amazing. Examples being was that my father became a pilot because there was a secret space program that the U.S. military was launching, or they wanted to launch, to spy on the Soviet Union, and it was called the Manned Orbiting Laboratory.
Wow.
And they needed flight surgeons to go up into these tin cans, to be the doctor for the spies, literally spies. And so my father raised his hand and volunteered for the program. And it was kind of ironic that in order to become an astronaut, he had to become a pilot.
Hmm.
I've always wondered, you don't fly a rocket, but anyway, that was what happened. So he became a flying physician. Now that program never did take off. It got moved over to NASA, and I think they used satellites to do the job instead of sending people up in the air. But the thing was is that after that, my father had top secret clearance, so he was moved to Beale Air Force Base. And that's where the SR-71 Blackbird resided. And that plane, if nobody, or if your audience doesn't know what the SR-71 Blackbird is, just picture what Batman would fly. So anyway, this was a plane that was a spy plane, and it would fly between 70 and 80,000 feet, or about 15 miles high. And at high speed, Mach 3 times the speed of sound, at high altitude, and it would heat up. It got to high pressure and high temperature. So the plane was designed to actually expand while in flight, but on the
Wow.
ground it was contracted, and by design, it would leak fuel on the ground. So the SR-71 Blackbird was constantly leaking fuel. And so the ground crews had to wear rain ponchos to try to protect themselves from the fuels, which were exotic fuels for that plane. In fact, you could literally smoke a cigarette, drop it into a puddle of that fuel, and it would not ignite.
Wow.
But the fuels, the solvents, the oils, and all this stuff were contaminating the ground crews. So they were coming down with some kind of weird diseases and even some cancers. And my father, being their flight surgeon, was tasked with trying to find a way to detox them. But there was literally nothing in the medical literature for chemicals. We've got chelation for heavy metals, but that's only good for certain heavy metals. And by the way, I mentioned that you get some toxins being liberated from fat just doing normal activity where you're producing ATP energy. Well, that is why chelation works, because you're going to be releasing heavy metals as well from your fat. So chelation can pick those up, but it's a very slow process and can be very expensive. But anyway, so my father essentially had nothing to offer. But when he moved to California, his last post, by the way, was at Wright-Patterson, and where they stored the UFOs, right?
Oh, wow.
And the little green man. But anyway, so he retired from Wright-Patterson and moved to California, and he opened up his medical practice, which did start off as general and occupational and industrial medicine, but he wound up focusing fully on occupational medicine. And he started seeing people presenting with chemical exposures from the workplace. And the first what we call the index case were actually two painters who had been inside of a 650,000-gallon water tank. Picture one of those big towers, and they were painting the interior of that thing without any personal protective equipment. So they were
Wow.
inhaling all the fumes and getting exposed to the solvents and things like that. And there was only a little trap door at the bottom of that thing that allowed them to pass in and out, and that's the only airflow they had.
Wow.
So anyway, they came in about a year after their exposure with ataxia, which is clumsiness. They were walking into walls and things. They also really had no cognitive function left, and their wives were ready to divorce them because they were argumentative and things like that. So they came to the practice, and at that point, my father still didn't have anything to offer him. But serendipitously, he received a brochure at that time from a company called Body Pure that had on the brochure said niacin exercise and sauna for drug addiction rehab, which sounded kind of hokey to him at the time.
Sure.
And he wasn't involved with drug addiction, so he threw it in the trash. But that word sauna kept gnawing at him because we've known about sauna use. In fact, I've had a sauna since 1973 in my life.
Wow.
So since I was 10 years old, I was using saunas. And so we knew that there was value to them. In fact, we lived in Europe for 6 years, so we saw a lot of saunas over there. But eventually, he decided to call these folks. He pulled that. I mean, I think that thing passed through the trash can 3 times before he finally called them. But he went down to meet with them on a Friday, and it turned out they were actually a splinter group of Scientologists that had brought L. Ron Hubbard's purification rundown to the public without that stigma of recruitment of Scientology. And that didn't turn them off, which, it's good, but because here we are today. But the thing was that they gave him a 4-inch thick binder, and I still have that thing to this day, that included a lot of medical literature that explained why their protocol worked. And so he took that home over the weekend, read through it, and then decided to send those painters to their center. And they did get excellent results. I think he was expecting better, but again, they had been exposed a year prior. But anyway, the program worked. So he had other patients presenting because back then OSHA wasn't such a big deal, and so there was a lot of chemical exposures and heavy metals. But he wound up sending a lot of people to them, and then realized this is something he should incorporate into his practice. So that splinter group of Scientologists moved in next door across the hall from him, and they became his management team, and he became their Christian medical director. And he would do the physicals, and the patients were not having any kind of distress going through the program. And back then, distress was common because back then it was a 4.5 to 5 hour a day process.
Wow.
And that could go for 20 to 30 days. In fact, I went through it for 33 days. And
Wow.
My story is in my second edition. I finally, confess because back in the day, this was the early 80s, and I was a product of the Midwest of the late 70s. So, we were doing pretty much anything that didn't require a needle. And so at the time I moved to California, I moved in with a guy who became the right-hand man for the biggest cocaine dealer. And so we were, essentially doing everything that didn't require a needle. But the Scientologists who, were in drug addiction rehab spotted that immediately. But anyway, the thing was that my father needed a medical billing system and a practice management system, and I had a lot of experience from the '70s with the computer lab at high school, and then we had an Apple II Plus. So I really, latched onto the whole computer industry, and so I went out and found a platform that we could then install at his office that had, a four station, this was before Windows, right?
Yeah.
So it had a four station computer, and it had an operating system that can handle all four terminals. And then it had a billing system. It was all text based. But anyway, I was the only one who'd ever put those three things together. So once I installed it, it turned out I was going to have to actually implement it and train the staff who had never even seen a computer before, right? So
Wow.
anyway, the staff needed me to come on board. So the Scientologist said, as terms of my employment, I was going to volunteer to go through their program. And I went through it kicking and screaming. I wanted nothing to do with this Scientology nonsense. And I literally was their worst patient. However, on day 33, I hit a remarkable thing called end phenomena. And this is something that I've wished upon everybody, but unfortunately, in this day and age, we're being more polluted than we've ever been. This was back in 1986 when I went through it. End phenomena I characterize as having an overall sense of well-being. You've got high energy, stamina, and performance. The brain fog lifts, which I honestly didn't even know I had because we were so high all the time. And then the IQ, which we used to do scoring before and after the detox program, the IQ scores on average were 10 points reclaimed or regained. That's how I look at it. I feel like they're stolen to drugs or
Sure.
toxins. So anyway, the IQ was 10 points reclaimed on my score. And also my color vision, my sense of smell, and my sense of taste became more vivid. And my dreams became more vivid, and I remember those better. Now, the beauty is to this day, I still have all of that. So at
Wow.
60 years old, and turned 61 in September. So, it's hard for me to believe I'm that old because I feel like a healthy 30-year-old. And it's because I do the protocol and I do sauna daily. It's just part of my routine. And I feel like it's the healthiest appliance anybody can own.
Wow. So it started with you doing just dry sauna for over 4 hours a day for 33 days, and you're able to sort of reap the benefits um, of what was ultimately happening, which is getting the toxins out of your own body.
Well, the protocol calls for niacin and exercise, and there's a few other elements that we should discuss because niacin is a very unique vitamin. And in fact, we don't even use it as a vitamin on the protocol. It's a catalyst for two separate actions. Now, most people probably heard of the niacin flush or even experienced it. It's where the niacin uses it actually triggers prostaglandin PGD2 hormones in the capillary walls to release. Now, your capillaries that they're at the skin surface layers mostly, they're very constricted, and so they're only passing through so much in the way of red blood cells. But when you take niacin, it has this effect of actually relaxing those capillaries and allowing a lot more red blood cells to flow through. And we exploit that because, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have toxins that are always being liberated from fat through any energy production. So it helps to push those toxins, those bloodborne toxins, out to the dermal regions. And then the sauna can help sweat those out. Now, the secondary effect that most people have never even heard of is set up for about 3 hours. It takes about 3 hours for this to occur. And what happens is that the niacin inhibits the ability for ATP production to occur at normal levels. It doesn't shut it down completely. That's the Krebs cycle. You'd be dead. But it depresses or inhibits the ability to produce ATP at normal levels. So you get fatigued sometimes when you take niacin in the very beginning. But what happens is that this effect lasts the entire time that niacin is metabolizing, and it has a half-life of 20 to 45 minutes, and it takes about 5.5 half-lives, which is about 3 hours. And then what happens is once it wears off, or fully metabolizes, the body is able to resume the normal lipolysis. However, it's kind of like you had a stretched rubber band. So imagine me picture me holding a rubber band. This is normal lipolysis, and then this is you on niacin, and then after about 3 hours, like that thing shoots up in the air, and you get what's called rebound lipolysis, and it's an overshoot that translates to about 4 times normal levels of free fatty acids that are measurable in the blood plasma, and that also translates into about 3 times normal levels of toxins being liberated. Now,
Wow.
as you know, as guys who like to work out and things like that, guys and gals that like to work out, you probably have felt headachy or nauseous after doing an extensive like HIIT workout
Sure.
and or anything strenuous, and you've been told that you've got a buildup of lactic acid. In reality, you actually have liberated toxins at a much higher level, and you haven't done anything about it. So you haven't taken binders, you haven't been in the sauna or anything like that. So you get this effect of having like headache or nausea, or you get muscle, joint or pain in the muscles and joints. And cramping, by the way, is more of a magnesium type of deficiency or even potassium. But the thing is that you do get, some of that effect from having higher levels than normal of these toxins being liberated. Well, we use that with the rebound lipolysis at 3 times normal levels to make sure that we're getting the detox program to be more effective. Because at that point in our program, we actually put you into the sauna after it hits that peak. But we want you to exercise first, and that's because the flush does push blood out to the dermal regions, but the flush is going to be gone usually within 45 minutes on average, and we're talking 3 hours later. Plus, the fact is that after a certain period of time on our program, usually around 10 days, the flush stops happening altogether. And that's because the body doesn't reproduce or regenerate these prostaglandin hormones fast enough. So the capillaries will no longer start to do that vasodilation, and therefore the flush is basically gone. So we don't rely on that anymore. But the fact that the exercise can get the heart rate back up and get the blood pumping helps to push those bloodborne toxins that are now mobilized from the fat out to the dermal regions, and then the sauna will sweat them out. What's important also to know is that all we had back in the day were the dry saunas. And because they run so oppressively hot, like 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, most people could only stand to sit in those for about 15 to 20 minutes before they had to cool down for 5 to 10. So
Yep.
after repeated cycles of heating and cooling, heating and cooling, heating and cooling, you get to the point where you build up the core temperature to produce the kind of sweat we need. This is another important thing
Sure.
because we're dealing with lipophilic xenobiotics. These are fat-attracted heavy metals or man-made chemicals poured into the body, and they are hydrophobic. So they don't come out through your watery eccrine sweat. They are not going to just come out through your regular sweat. You need to generate sebaceous sweat. And sebaceous sweat is caused by the sebum in the sebaceous oil glands. So it's a lipid-based material that keeps the hair follicles lubricated and the hair and skin moist on the surface, and somewhat provides a barrier for bacteria, but not really against air pollution and things like that. And I will say chemtrails are real, and the aluminum oxide and barium oxide and other things that they're dropping is real, and that stuff is being absorbed through the skin as well as being inhaled. So we're getting toxic from all sources, and you can do your best to try to prevent getting toxic, but just know that you're going to be, and you've got a lifetime buildup of it, and our program is the best to get rid of it. But I want to come back to the sebaceous sweat because
Sure.
I do see people presenting these debunking articles that say you cannot sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in a sauna. And I go, that's right. But they say, you're the guy that wrote the book. I say, yes, but you got to understand there are, big pharma shills and things like that that don't want you to know about this program because it is the most effective way to actually get your body to heal. If you get rid of those barriers to good health, like the heavy metals and man-made chemicals, then you wouldn't need their system. So this is why at 60 years old, I have absolutely zero inflammation that they can find in my body. So, and that's through like AO scan, oligoscan, through Zytoscan, and I think the last one was Zavazia. But the bottom line here is that the toxins are not going to come out through the watery eccrine sweat. So that's one reason why you don't sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in a sauna. The second thing is that they use the word toxins. Now, the literal definition of a toxin is an antigenic poison or venom of plant or animal origin derived from microorganisms that in low concentration in the body can cause harm or disease. So they don't talk about heavy metals or man-made chemicals in that definition. The word is actually toxicants. But once those toxicants get into the body, they become xenobiotics, which are foreign substances. So when they say you can't sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in a sauna, that's right. You're not.
So you're not sweating toxicants, but toxicants, or
Yeah,
not toxins, but toxicants. Got it.
that's right. Yeah.
On
And
the
they use that
Yeah,
word play against you.
yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? And I think it's no secret, right, that I think we see a number of, let's call it, like, sort of silver bullet, good remedies that are cheap and effective are usually dismissed by pharmaceutical companies because, yeah, they have a business to run and it's within their best interest to not offer you some sort of magic bullet solution. I'm curious with, when you mentioned the chemtrails, right? I can imagine some people listening to this might be like, oh, well, chemtrails, like, what do you mean? Like, I think when people hear that, they think, oh, some entity is spraying chemicals into the air to intentionally harm us. Like, could you touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So actually, the technical term is geoengineering, and they use it for climate change. They use it for basically weather modification. The military uses it for ultra low frequency communications with underground bases and submarines. So the reality is that what they're spraying is actually they have good intentions, but in the end, their good intentions are severely affecting us and the ground. I mean, we have forests up here in Northern California that are dying because of the spraying, and people are trying to grow their own gardens and things like that, and or even just the farming we have here in California. And it's not isolated to California by any stretch, but this is where I know the most. And this stuff is falling to the earth, and it's affecting the ground. And in fact, I did a little mini documentary on chemtrails quite a while ago. I think it was 2016, because I was looking for images for a podcast that didn't have a video to go with it, and I wanted to have images to, show what we were talking about. And through my searching, I came across a picture of some tanks inside of an airplane, and the tanks were, connected to each other, and obviously connected to something that looked like it was, part of a bigger rig. And there was a patent number on the tanks. And so I looked the patent number up, and it turned out that it was associated to the CIA's largest chemtrail contractor, and that was Evergreen Aviation. And I found their schematics for their planes, and I then was shocked to find that the airport right near me happens to be the largest hub for Evergreen Aviation. And so that got my attention, and that's why I did the documentary. But I also included some clips from Dane Wigington's geoengineeringwatch.org website. And there's some, I mean, you can't deny that that's a plane spraying when you see the images. But that video is something that is part of a blog on my website, which I should mention is getdetoxinated.com. And if you go into the blog, you'll find an article called "And the Skies Are Not Cloudy All Day." So that
Wow.
will help to educate people a little bit more about the problem with the chemtrails. And by the way, the video that I produced is it starts off with John O'Brennan, the former CIA director. He's speaking to the Council on Foreign Relations, or the CFR, and I start with that video, so you'll see his image. And I'll tell you which one is mine.
And so, is there something? So you mentioned a few of the reasons why they'd be spraying these chemicals is, some military purposes. Uh, I guess, like, is this something that's unique to the United States? Is this happening around the world? Like, I guess, what are those positive intentions that they are intending?
Well, yeah, I get stories from clients around the world. I work, in fact, I do everything remotely now, so I work with hundreds of clients around the world, and it's actually quite interesting to see what's going on around the world. And yes, they are spraying all over. And in fact, if you want to really see something interesting, Tennessee just signed into law that they can't spray over Tennessee. So if they made a law, then there's your sign. But
Sure.
their good intentions, aren't necessarily good for us. They want to do solar radiation management for, what they call climate change. And frankly, these are taxation weapons against us. So we've got to, look into this deeper. But the other things too are the weather modification. In fact, one of the stories in my blog article describes how they were spraying during Vietnam over the Ho Chi Minh Trail to cause the monsoon to come early and wash out the trail so that the Viet Cong could not use the trail to transport, their goods and their weapons. So, I mean, it goes that far back. In fact, there's a military article that or publication that I think is titled something to the effect of controlling the weather or owning the weather by 2025, and they had exceeded that deadline a long time ago. So, but it is used for weather modification. In fact, there was the Olympics that were held in China, and they decided to cause rain to occur to, I guess, wash China up a bit. And they wound up causing a really bad blizzard. I don't know if you all remember that, but that was because they were doing weather modification. And this is all from what are called chemtrails. So now that word is kind of,
Stigmatized.
yeah, exactly. It's geoengineering is what it's called.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a lot less of a stretch, compared to like the sort of conspiracies around chemtrails, like someone's just trying to, dumb us down or something like that. Whereas, if there's more of a purpose. Even right now in the news, there's a big story about the flooding in Dubai, and I've seen some reports that was related to an attempt to cause rain. It's just too much rain or something like that.
I did see that. I have not looked into it any deeper, but believe me, that would not surprise me.
Yeah, sure. Um, so with that sort of understood, there's again many chemicals in our environment that are causing us harm that we are not aware of how to handle them. I guess with the sauna protocol, what is the I guess how do you eliminate these things from affecting you over the long term? Or how do is there a time limit for when you can actually remove these from your body entirely?
Well, considering the fact that we usually have to ask people if they've ever done LSD, because even if you did LSD 50 years ago and you do our program, there's a good chance you'll have flashes or flashbacks or trips. I always joke that you get your money's worth with this program, but anyway, the thing is that a lot of these heavy metals and chemicals will sequester in the fat and stay there until they're acted upon. They may get liberated during ATP production, but they're just going to resequester elsewhere, which is called redistribution, if they're not dealt with. And so I strongly recommend people, even if you're not doing our program, to at least get on zeolite. Zeolite, clinoptilolite is the best binder for most every kind of chemical that we deal with, as well as heavy metals. And by the way, this protocol is very successful with mold. Mold is a huge problem. Mold mycotoxins, yeah, they're very lipophilic. They'll store in fat. And so we treat a lot of people with mold. And there's other conditions too that people may not even associate to heavy metal toxicity, and that's EHS, or electrohypersensitivity. So people who are concerned with EMFs or electromagnetic fields because of their electrohypersensitivity are actually, in most cases, suffering from heavy metal toxicity. And I've actually witnessed a very interesting case because I'd been hearing from some of the people in my Facebook group, which is the same name as the book Sauna Detoxification Using Niacin. But the Facebook group has a large contingent of people who have been poisoned by gadolinium. Those are the gadolinium-based contrast agents from MRIs. And if you've ever had an MRI with even a single gadolinium injection, you may want to look into this protocol because you may be experiencing some really bizarre symptoms that are like electrical sensations or brain zaps, severe bone pain, maybe even hair loss, or your body's constantly cold. That's a lower temperature than it should be. But there's a lot of different symptoms like this. And the worst symptom is called nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, or NSF, where the skin starts to get wooded in patches. It gets very thick and it feels, almost like wood. Well, that's a gadolinium-based contrast agent symptom, or gadolinium deposition disease. And so there's a large contingent of people in my Facebook group who have suffered with that. In fact, I had one nurse who had over 32 injections. And when I first learned about her, she was bedridden and disabled and pretty much praying for it all to end. And today she's a very vibrant and active woman and very happy because she's gone through our program. Now, it's not a one and done in most cases, by the way. The studies that we've done on this protocol over 30 years have pretty much consistently shown about 1/3 of the body burden reduced in a 30-day program. So people should consider, making this more a part of their life or their part of their health routine, because 1/3 of the body burden may be enough for some people, but for most, you probably will need to go through it at least twice. So, plan on doing that. We do like 30 days on, 2 weeks off, and or more, and then another 30 days. And I can help to give you consultations on this. In fact, I do a complimentary consultation that people can book for at heal.me/detox. But going back to the gadolinium and the EMFs and the EHS. So I had a patient who came in. Now, she's a retired now patrol woman. She was at the time active, although on disability. She was a patrol woman from New York who had been involved with a lot of, I mean, we're talking at least 100 meth lab raids. And in the production of meth, they use a lot of different solvents. And it's nothing like what I saw in Breaking Bad. But anyway, so the police, when they bust these labs, they get doused with all this stuff. It's getting thrown around. There's a melee going on. So
Sure.
she was doused with all this stuff. And there was a study that we were consultants on called the Utah Meth Cops Project that I think was close to over a decade ago now. But anyway, that study was what prompted her, and actually it was what prompted a detective from her same precinct that came in first, and he got great results. In fact, his towels are some that we love to display in pictures in various places on our website and things like that. He had some really colorful tie-dye towels, for example. But anyway, she had come in because he had such great results, and I thought she was coming in just for that. But she had mentioned that she had also had fibromyalgia, chronic migraines, and that she'd mentioned that she had a slip and fall injury where she was wearing that big, police vest that had a lot of padding and things. So when she fell backwards, her head did a major whiplash thing. And so her range of motion was such that she could only lift one arm fully up and the other one would, maybe not even pass the top of her head. So anyway,
Wow.
she had this problem. But what one thing I do when people say they have fibromyalgia is I use a beamer mat, a pulse electromagnetic field or PEMF mat, to help microcirculation. And so I laid her on that thing. And I know from experience that I can't feel that. You shouldn't be able to feel that because these are, little coils of copper wire inside of a mat, and there's a computer control, excuse me, that turns different coils on or off in different programs. And, essentially these frequencies are designed to resonate with the body and help with microcirculation. And that's why I do it because, with fibromyalgia, is because I want to get the microcirculation going at the ends. So anyway, she laid down on that thing. I turned it on and she started squirming around going, "Oh, this feels really nice." And I'm looking at her cockeyed like, "You don't feel that." And she said, "But I do," and I pulled out the little device that shows which coils are active. And sure enough, wherever the coils were active, she was feeling it. And so I
Wow.
asked her, "When you said you had a slip and fall injury, did you have an MRI?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Did they give you that contrast dye?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, you just validated what I've been hearing from some of the people in my Facebook group that feel the Wi-Fi and 5G because they've also been injected with gadolinium. So apparently gadolinium is resonating with the frequencies that are used in certain, applications like the beamer mat. Now, I've also found other metals to resonate, and we can actually become magnets. And there's a whole new level of research going on that I should probably share in a little bit. But it's so cutting edge that there's no paper yet published in the United States. There is one in Russia, but I'm working with two doctors that are involved with this, Dr. Scott Schroeder and Dr. Harold Zelliger. But we'll come back to that one because this story is kind of interesting because once she went through the 30-day program, the she couldn't feel the beamer mat anymore. And so that was really good news because most people who've had even one gadolinium injection should do the protocol at least 3, if not 4 times. So she
Wow.
was lucky because it had just recently happened. Now, her case even gets even more interesting because she had fibromyalgia and she had chronic migraine that I knew of at the time. Well, immediately upon starting the protocol, she no longer needed her migraine medication. It cleared up. And I almost attributed that one to the zeolite because she hadn't been through the program enough in the very beginning. So I'm attributing that one to the zeolite. But the fibromyalgia cleared up. And then about a week or two after she got home from our 30-day program, I get a call from her and she said, Dan, this is the height of allergy season, and I don't even feel affected by the allergies. And so that was kind of cool. We didn't think about allergies when we were doing this. In fact, I should mention, by the way, we had blinders on. We were in occupational medicine. We were dealing with acute poisonings,
Yes.
heavy metals and chemicals, as well as the drug addiction rehab that was still going on. So, basically, we weren't even thinking about all these other conditions that we could reverse. And then about a week or two after that, I got a call from her. She said, I never told you this, but I had endometriosis. I no longer have that. So
Wow.
that was amazing. So just to give you an idea of some of the conditions that we've seen reversed, and I also have seen diabetes type 2 reversed, but that one's relatively easy to reverse if you just clean up your diet and be more careful about what you're doing with your body. But there's a lot of different conditions. MS, for example, and in fact, any condition that has no known etiology or is non-communicable or non-genetic, look into it deeper because it probably has some kind of environmental toxicant relation.
I mean, it makes sense to me. Like we're living in a world where we're surrounded by chemicals that there's never been a population that's been exposed to this level of different chemicals, the quantity of them. And so it makes sense to me that there's many unknowns associated with that, even going back to how many of these chemicals have been studied. And then on top of that, like we don't know those ramifications. And there's so many of these diseases that people report having that we don't have a clear idea of where it even comes from. Uh, looking at our environment and trying to eliminate these chemicals from our body sounds like yes, it's not a perfect science in the sense that there's still that we don't know what we don't know about these things. So we don't know the implications of uh, how you could potentially heal some of these things that, it's not perfectly documented across the spectrum, right? So sort of makes sense to me that by healing one thing, you might be affecting other things as well.
Yeah, in fact, thanks for bringing that up because anytime there's an opportunistic pathogen or something like Candida overgrowth or SIBO, even Lyme or EBV for that matter, the body isn't able to fight back while it's toxic. So once you remove these barriers to good health, the environmental toxins that become xenobiotics, then the body's able to fight back. And so I've seen a lot of different, conditions that we were never even thinking about. I definitely have seen, Lyme reverse, and I've seen, Candida overgrowths and the SIBO reverse. But I don't say we're detoxing those. What we're doing is helping the body to be able to fight back. Now, there is
Sure.
something else that you brought up about, the science isn't really all there yet. This is actually a good place to bring up the new stuff that's going on. So Dr. Scott Schroeder and Dr. Harold Zelliger and I have been talking recently. In fact, I'm going to be meeting with Scott again here shortly because he has been for 10 years researching the effects of metals in the body as he's a foot and ankle surgeon. So this is kind of an interesting twist for him, but he was finding that when he was putting screws or plates into the feet of his patients, sometimes these patients would have some kind of new condition or conditions that were affecting their health drastically. And I'm talking about, not just the chronic fatigue, which is definitely in there, but we're talking about tremors, paralysis, and other conditions that were extreme. And the connecting of the dots wasn't happening until he started to remove the screws because after a while they're not needed anymore. For example, after the bone fuses, he would remove the screws and overnight the symptoms went away.
Wow.
So what he's been discovering and what Dr. Zelliger and I are helping to try to do a better job understanding is the fact that there's a thing called galvanism going on when there's differing metals in the body. And so this can mean like you have a titanium tooth implant, or maybe knee replacements or hip replacements, and then you have a different metal installed or inserted into your body. That becomes a differing metal. And whenever you have differing metals, there's a potential or voltage created. And because of things like our blood and we're basically water, those are conductors, and they can conduct electricity from one metal to the other. And that also, in the galvanism, is going to create not just the currents, which the body's not expecting, because these are signals. Our body runs off of
Electrical
electrochemical
signals.
signaling,
Yeah.
you know. So then you created a whole new type of electricity in the body that it wasn't expecting, and so you get these weird conditions. But as soon as he removes one of the differing metals, it appears that these symptoms clear up. And
Wow.
so it's startling research. Now, apparently, the Russians have already identified this as far back as 2011, but in this country, there is no other research that we know of that's going on with this. And so it's a pretty exciting time, because he's also finding out that not only is there galvanism, and we already know heavy metals in the body are a big problem, but excuse me, the other thing too is that he's finding that many people have actual allergic reactions or sensitivities to certain metals, and nickel seems to be a common denominator in a lot of people. So things like titanium actually aren't pure titanium; they have a bit of nickel in them. So there's other things too. Your amalgam fillings, for example, are an amalgam of different metals, 50% of it which is mercury, but that's
Wow.
not good anyway. And you better get those mercury fillings out when you can, but use a IAOMT smart trained dentist to be able. It's a biological dentist to be able to get those out safely. But the thing is that this is a differing metal, and so if you have even a band in your mouth, braces, other fillings, or even clamps. Let's say you've had your gallbladder removed and they used a metal clamp. That's a differing metal. So there's a lot of ways that people are coming down with conditions they don't even have a clue are caused by these metals. But I got to say, the research has not been published and it's not been peer reviewed. And this is cutting edge that we're talking about here. And his 10 years of actual discovery in this, he's actually been interviewed many times. So if you look up Dr. Scott Schroeder and galvanism, you'll find several videos related to this. And in fact, he did a presentation to the FDA. I think he had 9 minutes to present, so it's kind of rushed. But he actually shows how he showed there's a voltage potential even 6 feet apart. So a tall person, for example, it may have had fillings, and he puts a screw in the foot. The potential voltage is higher than the nerves need to trigger. So he showed that using literally a that racetrack, the Hot Wheels racetrack.
Hmm.
And he also had surgical gel that he ran down the length of that. And sure enough, there was higher potential or voltage there than is needed to trigger nerves.
Wow.
So this is very fascinating stuff. I think you're the first interview I've done where I've even brought this up. So
I mean, it's kind of crazy to me because on one hand, I can hear the skeptics saying, "Oh, well, there's no studies about it. It's not conclusive. It's not peer reviewed. So like they can't take that as, gospel, right?" But on the other hand is like, yeah, you're putting metal in your body, like a foreign substance that doesn't belong there. Like, of course, there's going to be side effects. I don't think anyone could deny that putting any foreign object into your body is going to have some potential side effects. So it's kind of like just because it hasn't been perfectly documented yet doesn't mean that you should still be victim to those different situations. Like you should still probably pursue things even and remedies, even if they're not scientifically proven yet.
agreed. Yeah. In fact, our protocol is so new to the public that we're looked upon that way too, because we've had this in occupational medicine for over 30 years. I don't know if I mentioned it already in this interview, but there was a challenge by the state board or the California Medical Board, and my father submitted a 50-page response, and that actually got it passed through the California. I think I did mention that, but the thing is that because we've only been in occupational medicine for so long, it is something that people are just now really learning about. But the Europeans have known saunas are good for health and detoxification, and all we have done really is to improve the mechanism by at least 200%. It's three times normal levels of toxins are being liberated and then able to be released. Now, one of the important things too is that the original method, the Hubbard method, did not use binders. And because rebound lipolysis lasts for about 6 hours after it triggers, it's at a peak and then it comes back down to baseline. There's a period of time where you're not in the sauna, and it's a long period of time, and you're still at an elevated level of toxins being liberated. So you have to really do the binders, and these binders are capable of doing a lot more than just the gut or the GI tract. They're filtering the villi and also picking up bile acid toxins. So there's value to doing that even without our protocol.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. I mean, again, it's sort of one of those that, like, exactly what you said. Like, Europeans have known about sauna for a long time. It's one of those things that's like it has existed for hundreds, thousands of years, whatever. You got to assume there's something to it, right? There's a reason why we still have saunas. So there's
Exactly.
whether and ancient humans probably they definitely did not have the science around it. They didn't understand it on a cellular level, right? But there's something going on.
Yeah, in fact, I think they found some of these old, I think they call them sweat lodges, as old as 3,000 years old.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, doesn't surprise me whatsoever. It's one of these things too, where you look at I think people just underestimate how much we need, how much activity we need in general, just day to day. We live very sedentary lifestyles. Many people are just indoors all day. This is very unnatural to us as humans, where, previously we definitely would have had to be outside, breathing fresh air under the sunlight, and moving a lot more than what we do today. So, people sort of sleep on just the basics of exercise, never mind just the reality that humans are made to sweat, and we have a function of sweating, right? It's like built into
Mhm.
our it's built into the human biological system there. So it's like, what is the purpose of this if not to get rid of toxins and remove things, cool off, and other things?
Exactly. Yeah, and the fever that we get when we're trying to fight off an infection, we're basically mimicking that kind of effect with sauna. And there's a lot of other health benefits to sauna. The cardio, it's almost like doing a workout for people who can't even exercise.
Yeah.
So I strongly encourage people to own a sauna. And like I said, I sauna for 30 minutes every day. It's really literally part of my routine.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've been using sauna for many years, and that's why this is I've just discovered your work recently. And it's mind blowing to me that, it's like, yes, there are benefits to using sauna, but there's a way that you can amplify these benefits by following this protocol.
Yeah,
So
it's called biohacking, right?
yeah, biohacking. Yeah, it's like let's optimize, and I think that's it's never been more popular than it is right now. You even see sauna studios opening up around all over the place in growing cities. You have the hot cold therapy, things like that. Like, this has never been more popular than it is today. And again, it's not there may not be a ton of published papers around it, but people are feeling the benefits of it, so they're going in this direction. Um,
Exactly.
to get into the actual protocol itself, so I just got the kit of all, which I'm someone that I've been working out regularly for a long time. I'm used to taking a lot of supplements and protein powders and things like that, right? But even for me, opening up this kit is like, wow, there's a lot in here. There's a lot going on. Um, how do you make that more digestible for the general public to follow this protocol and to to be able to approach it in a way that they feel like they're going to succeed and not do something wrong?
Well, firstly, that's why I offer remote detox coaching. But the other thing too is the kit that you have was originated for the Church of Scientology version of this program called the Purification Rundown. So that's one of the reasons it's already well designed for the program, but it does not include binders. So you need to have the addition of the binders, which I will touch on upon real briefly because there
Sure.
are certain binders that are good for certain things. So, for example, we know that activated charcoal and zeolite are good for heavy metals and some positively charged poisons like chemicals and things like that. But if you have mold mycotoxins or some other types of pathogenic type of things, there may be a better choice like bentonite clay or enteros gel. So depending on the type of needs, and this is why I do complimentary consultations, so I can understand more about people's cases, as well as identify any contraindications or preclusions that they shouldn't do this program. Briefly, by the way, pregnancy, breastfeeding, absolute no. And then there are certain heart conditions that we would have to question. And if you do really truly have compromised livers or kidneys, then you definitely want to get that dealt with before you do something like this. But those are the main ones to talk about. But anyway, with the kit, there was also, by the way, dosing charts that were specific to the kit, which is another thing that makes it really convenient for people, especially those who have brain fog. So I've tried to make it real simple for you. But the kit does have things like different levels of niacin, because as you increase daily, it's helpful to have 100 milligram, 500 milligram, and 1,000 milligram doses so that you can exactly titrate up. And then there's the vitamins and minerals that are important to replenish. Now, again, this is not supplementation to us. This is all replenishments, because we do sweat the good stuff out with the bad. And it is mostly the minerals. So potassium, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and chloride are the main ones that we do sweat out. And then we do need to replenish a lot more of the calcium and magnesium. So those are in a separate set of pouches that are called, they're calcium gluconate and magnesium carbonate, which are used with apple cider vinegar to make a beverage called CalMag. And CalMag takes the alkaline substance of calcium gluconate and makes it more acidic so the body can actually make it more bioavailable. And we need the calcium and magnesium, by the way, for two separate things, at least. There's the bones and the muscles. So to prevent, any kind of cramping, twitching, or any kind of spasms in a sauna, it helps to have the CalMag. But people who have lead poisoning, for example, or gadolinium poisoning, those store in the bone. So we need to have something that can help displace that and replace it. So the CalMag, because the bones actually need both calcium and magnesium, so those are both needed for that as well. So there's those pouches, and that covers about, I think, 5 or 6 of the of the pouches so far in there. There's also the electrolytes. There's potassium, there's salt or sodium chloride tablets, and then there's also what are called plasma electrolytes. Those are also known as cell salts, but those are taken after each sauna cycle. And in the case of infrared saunas, there's a 45-minute sauna cycle followed by a 5 to 15 minute break, and then you go for another 30 minutes. And believe me, you work up to that. You don't, start off at these kind of levels. But the other things that are in there are lecithin and oils. So we use essential fatty acids of the 3, 6, and 9. So it's a good blend of essential fatty acids. And then to help break those down as an emulsifier, we use lecithin. But more importantly, lecithin is a primary source of choline. And choline has a lot of functions that we exploit with the program, one of them being the cell membranes. It helps make these cell membranes more able to pass through these toxins that are coming out of the fat. But for those who have, been tested for MTHFR and are concerned about undermethylation, I want you to know that we've never had a problem with MTHFR or undermethylation. And for those of you that don't know what this is all about, MTHFR is a gene that helps regulate several things, including detoxing naturally in the body. So people who have been tested for these two SNPs or two polymorphisms are basically told that they were going to have problems detoxing. Again, this goes back to the definition of toxins. So we're talking endogenous toxins that are essentially, the cell or the bacteria that die off, or they do excrete, so they're poop. But there are toxins in the body that people with the MTHFR gene variations or polymorphisms are going to have a little bit more difficulty detoxing. Believe me, everybody on the planet is going to have problems with detoxing chemicals and heavy metals that were never intended for the body. But the thing about MTHFR is that some people are also under methylators. And so we need to be able to work with them separate or differently. We would use methylated B vitamins, for example. But the thing with our program is that a lot of people are aware that niacin is what's called a methyl sponge. And in the case of the choline, it's a methyl donor. So they balance each other out. And this is why we've never had any problems with people with MTHFR or under methylation on our program. Thought I'd share that with you because it does come up. There's a lot of people who are being tested for that these days.
Yeah, sure. Of course. Um, I'm curious with you mentioned dental fillings, you mentioned gadolinium that comes from some MRIs. Like, are there some other situations where people may have had medical interventions or procedures or just day-to-day habit routine where they should especially consider going through this protocol?
That's a really good question. The term iatrogenesis is important in our field because iatrogenesis are conditions, excuse me, caused by the medical therapy or the diagnostic. And MRIs would fall into that category for sure, especially with the gadolinium-based contrast agents. But even the mercury fillings, for example, can be looked at as iatrogenesis. But there's a lot of different things like polypharmacy that needs to be looked into because pharmaceuticals are actually mostly petrochemical based, so they're already toxic. And if you ever look up LD50, that'll scare you a little bit because LD50, all pharmaceuticals have to have an LD50 rating, and that means lethal dose 50. So that means that pharmaceuticals have to have a lethal dose, and then they figure out what 50% of that dose is, and that's where they start figuring out where to dose it for people. So look
Interesting.
LD50 up if you don't know about that one. But anyway, so the fact that they're petrochemical based is reason enough to look into doing a detox because the reality is that we're seeing chemicals and heavy metals that are now what are called xenoestrogens, or they mimic estrogens. And then there are just endocrine disrupting chemicals that cause thyroid conditions. So people, have their thyroids either removed or destroyed. My wife being one of them, before we realized that we were under this social allopathic conditioning spell, which I actually coined in my book. And so, she no longer has a working thyroid and is now basically living off of synthetic or actually desiccated thyroid. But the thing is that with these interventions, there's a lot of things that are causing harm. In fact, the third leading cause of death is medical
Medical malpractice, right?
malpractice, I guess is the best word for it. Yeah. But there are medical issues that came up. So anyway, the other medical things that people are dealing with are things like breast implant illness. They had breast implants, and they do leach into the body, and there are different. It's not just silicon in there. There's a lot of different other things that are toxic to the body, and so breast implant illness is a very real thing. And even after you have the breasts removed, you really should go through a detox program or the breast implants explanted. So that's another example. But in my group, there's a large contingency or cohort of people who are there because of iatrogenesis. And so there's a lot of different reasons why people, find that their medical interventions were not the best answer. My wife, again, being one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone probably knows somebody who's had a bad experience in a hospital environment. It's just one of those things where people generally know if you want to avoid additional side effects, you should avoid trying to get or avoid being in the hospital or needing medical care in the first place.
Exactly. And this is why, this protocol is so important because when people use this for preventative measures, then they're less likely to need to go to see, the conventional medicine system. So in fact, at 60 years old, I don't even have a primary care practitioner. My father retired in 2019. I rarely ever needed him for anything, as far as medicine goes. But he was fourth generation medical doctor. His great grandfather and grandfather were both what we would call holistic doctors.
Hmm.
And then Rockefeller medicine kicked in 1911, and that basically made doctors like his father and him both legalized drug pushers. In fact, my father told my brother and I don't follow in his footsteps because he saw that the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies were the ones practicing medicine, not the doctors.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of these instances of just the way the business has to run, right? Like many people call healthcare sick care for a reason, and it's because it's mostly to deal with problems after they have happened rather than preventative care, which again is generally not going to be as profitable, right? So it's not going to be mentioned as much, or even primary care physicians, as I'm sure many of them are well intentioned and they got into that field for the right reason, just simply you're either not aware of it, or they're, like we've discussed, there haven't been enough studies on some of these preventative methods.
Exactly. Well, they're trained to just mask symptoms. So that's all they're going to do. And then, of course, they'll give you a petrochemical pharmaceutical that causes side effects. So they got a pill for that too, right?
Yep.
So, it's a never-ending cycle. But hey, they got you for life, don't they? They got you as a permanent client until your life is shortened. So,
Yeah.
I'm all about health span. That's a term that's not relatively used yet, but I'm promoting the term health span a lot more because I feel like what's the point of living a longer life if you are, disabled or have some kind of condition that is debilitating or chronic? And this is definitely the best program I have ever been involved with. I used to come from the IT world, remember? So I can tell you that I was in the service industry of the IT world for almost 35 years, I think it was. And I can tell you that what I do today is far more rewarding. And I get to work with people all around the world. And, we use Zoom like today, like we're doing here. And it is using the tools to be able to really help as many people as possible. So, and I also do have a training program. I want to mention that I do have by the way, we coined the term detoxination. I am the senior detoxinician. And we do have a program that is, a training program for detoxinicians. And that is a program that can take anybody that, like I came from the IT world, right? I can teach you what you need to know to be able to deliver this protocol. And even though the protocol itself is pretty straightforward, there's a lot of reasons why you need to be able to tailor it for individuals. And this is what the training teaches you. And that also includes a lot of tools. I have trained ChatGPT. I've got a detox coach custom
Wow.
GPT that has all of the education that a person would need, including all of our writings, our studies. I have a PhD level overview, which, by the way, I'm willing to share with people. If anybody wants to see a PhD level overview, just reach out to me, and I'll be happy to send it to you. And by the way, I'm Dan at getdetoxinated.com. So if you're interested in learning more about either the detoxination training or receiving the PhD level overview of this program, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. But the program right now, uh, just so people know, it's going to be towards the end of the year, $10,000, 99.99. Right now, I've got it on sale for 49.99, and I am actually willing to even discount that 40% just to get as many people as I can trained into this. And it's something that it's important for more people to be able to deliver this protocol, because right now I'm it, and I don't want to be the only one. I want to be able to make sure that as many people get served with this as possible. And so look into my detoxination training program, and you'll find the information on that, by the way, in my shop at getdetoxinated.com.
I mean, I love it. I think it's a great way to augment anyone who, there's more people than ever focused on helping people get healthy, whether they're personal trainers or whatever else. So it seems like a great opportunity to add to your skill stack there and be able to deliver an additional level of service, which again sounds like can potentially solve many different health problems for their patients, or for their clients. So I
Absolutely. And by the
yeah.
way, if somebody's already in practice and has other offerings, you've got a captive audience for 30 days. So, if you got other modalities you'd like to introduce them to, this is a great way to get them back every day. But for the most part, people are going to learn more about this program, and the more people that do learn about it, the more they're going to be seeking people who can deliver it when they have conditions. I have made the book to be a one size fits all. It's a general overview of how the program is done. But for many people out there, they're going to need to have somebody actually walk them through it and be their coach. So When I work with people, by the way, I use Google Sheets as well as some of the other tools like Zoom. Google Sheets is how we do a online workbook that has their log sheet. It's got a symptom survey and some other things, and I can then track their progress and spot any trends or any issues that need to have, course corrections or things like that. So I use the tools, and I also do have a video tutorial course that we recorded at this location here, which is obviously an image, but this was the center my father and I opened up in 2016, I believe it was. But this center shut down in 2019, and then I moved in with a chiropractor who had a wellness center. But of course, as soon as I moved, COVID hit, and we got pretty well shut down because of that. So I've been essentially working with people remotely, and the tools that are available today are far better than I had before. So I'm able to help with people doing this anywhere around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really amazing. And I am extremely appreciative that you've laid this groundwork so thoroughly for this practice, not just, sort of being the sole, owner of all this information, but trying to decentralize it, trying to bring more awareness to it. And again, I think it's in a prime position to take hold because so many people are focused on these alternative methods of getting healthy, using sauna. I guess I would say, like, what do you see as the two or few maybe biggest barrier to entries for anyone who wants to go into this process and do the protocol?
Personally, I think it's the learning curve because most people never heard of this, and so there's going to be that skepticism, and this is why I try to make the information as available as possible, like the PhD level overview. Which, by the way, Dr. Harold Zeliger, who is the most prolific chemical toxicologist out there, published the most papers and things like that. I sent him the PhD level overview. Actually, I sent him a much more detailed one. It had 29 pages, whereas the one I'm sending to people today is 16 pages. But anyway, I sent him the full thing, and he sent back a response saying that I should submit this as my toxicology PhD thesis. So that's pretty impressive to hear from somebody like him. But anyway, so the first thing would be probably getting past the understanding that this is a legitimate detox that has actually saved thousands of people around the world. In fact, we really haven't talked about some of the things like the World Trade Center. There's the New York
Sure.
Rescue Workers Detox Project, and that actually treated over 5,000 people. And
Wow.
these are first responders, volunteers, and some civilians that were involved with the cleanup efforts. And the problem was every time they would lift any kind of debris, there'd be a new dust cloud that would be raised, and there was a lot of toxic material in those dust clouds, and none of the people had to go or that went through it had to pay to go through it because we were able to raise donations and grants for that. So that ran from
Wow.
2002 to 2007, which literally shut down the center we had in Sacramento. It never reopened, so that's why my father and I had to build a new one here. And this was after my wife had a radioactive iodine therapy that destroyed her thyroid. And, basically we realized that had we detoxed her and just changed our diet, that her hyperthyroidism wouldn't have been, needing any kind of intervention. So that was the past. And I'm trying to help people making the same mistake we did. But the other, projects that we've done I've mentioned the Utah Meth Cops project. There was also a Gulf War syndrome study that was done. The results of that study came out in 2019. It took a lot of years to get the actual study completed and funded, for funding for the completion even. But there was several other studies. There was actually one that was done with the children of Chernobyl who were affected by the
Wow.
fallout because this is good for radiation as well. Now, that does not mean ionizing radiation. It means things like, the uranium 230 or the cesium 137 and the radioactive uranium. But there's other things too that we can detox that I hadn't mentioned. But anything that's lipophilic or fat attracted and the body is not able to break down, those are things that we can detox. But so other studies that are published can be found on our website at getdetoxinated.com/studies. I encourage people to go through that as well as to look at some of the presentations that my father made. He's presented to the WHO, he's presented to the EPA, the CDC, and even to a presidential, it was a congressional board. I can't remember the total title of this thing, but it had to do with the Gulf War incidents. So that's what led to the funding of the Gulf War syndrome study. But
Wow.
anyway, it's very well studied, very well presented around the world, and literally, you guys just haven't heard of it because it took me until 2019 to get the book out. So, but then COVID hit, and here we are.
Here we are. Well, so I imagine one of the things people are going to be thinking if they hear this, they might be thinking like, I need a sauna. What do you recommend? Because I feel like there's many saunas on the market today. There's those, of course you can get like a legitimate, hot sauna, get the heater and everything. You can buy, more personalized 1 and 2 person infrared saunas are becoming more popular. And then even there's like those, like zip up sauna boxes or whatever. Like, is there a difference in the type of sauna, and what would you recommend for people that are looking into it?
Well, thanks for bringing that up because it's a very important question. As I said, am very knowledgeable and an expert in saunas, especially the infrared. And so I have researched the best saunas that are the lowest EMFs. They're non-VOC, at least in the cabin style, like the ones you see in the image behind me. Those are cabin style. The one you described with the zipper is pretty much called a portable, or some people call them tents. There's a couple of brands that I can recommend for that. In fact, I'll just mention those real briefly is Therasage and Relax saunas. We know that they are capable of producing sebaceous sweat, but the problem with portables is that there's no guarantees of them being like lower than the cabin style saunas for EMFs and VOCs. In fact, most the cabin style saunas I work with don't have any off gassing because they don't use glues or the plywoods or things like that. So in fact the brands I recommend are Radiant Health saunas, Clearlight saunas, and Sunstream saunas in that order. Clearlight would be considered the Cadillac of the industry, but they also have a little bit higher EMFs in the full spectrum, like the one you see, let's see, that way. So that one is a full spectrum sauna, and it does put off a little more EMFs than the others that we talk about. So they rank number two, even though they're the Cadillac. Radiant Health saunas I consider to be the workhorse of the industry, and you don't see it in this particular image behind me, but we had a 4-person Radiant Health sauna at our last center. And I liked it because it had benches that were facing each other instead of all across the back
Mm.
wall. And so there's plenty of room for 4 people to sit. In fact, there was plenty of room for 6 people to sit, but I think you'd have to have 2 of them being kids. But the feet didn't touch, the bodies didn't touch, so it was perfect for having 4 people at one time in the sauna. And that is the workhorse. So whatever your favorite, pickup truck is, Dodge, Chevy, Ford, GMC, whatever, that's what that one is. I would use those in a center. Excuse
And
me.
now, yeah.
Then Sunstream is what I would consider the Kia or Hyundai of the industry. They are, they started off as pretty, low quality cars, but they then evolved into a much better car. And in fact, the name of their saunas are Evolve. So that's I find rather ironic. But anyway, Sunstream and Radiant Health and Clearlight, I am an affiliate for all 3 of those. And also with the Therasage and the Relax. And you can learn more about those on our website, again, at getdetoxinated.com, and go into the shop and look into the sauna selector guide. And that will teach you a lot more about how infrared saunas work, because literally, people think that it's all about the heat, how much, your thermostat is set to, or your
Yeah.
how much is set to, and the temperature thing. Anyway, so the thing is that with infrared saunas, it's nothing to do with convection like a dry sauna. It's everything to do with how infrared waves resonate with our bodies. So right now we're putting off a actual infrared wavelength at 9.4 microns. So we're resonating with the sun at 9.4 microns, and this is how we actually get heat from the sun. And infrared saunas, by the way, don't have the UV problem, so you don't get sunburn or anything like that. But the sauna manufacturers know that the far infrared wavelengths are the wavelengths that produce this type of resonance. And so the saunas that you can buy today are tuned to between 6 and 12 microns to cover the 9.4, which is the optimal, resonance. So what happens is that they penetrate about 1.5 inches deep under the skin, and these infrared waves, and they do resonate with water molecules in the skin, and that causes vibrational heat. So you're actually heating up from the inside out, not like a microwave, guys. So, but that's actually ionizing, but this is not. So the body will warm up from the inside out, and that means that instead of convection, like where you have to heat the air first in a dry sauna, and then that becomes conduction and heats the body. The infrared is actually heating from the inside out, and this produces sebaceous sweat at lower temperatures at less time, and so you get a more effective detox with those. Now, a dry sauna will work. We've been using them for years, but it can take a lot longer. In fact, I recommend at least 2 hours of total time in a sauna, but that's, multiple cycles, like 6 cycles of going in for 15 to 20 minutes. But there are things like the dome, or what can also be called cocoon style saunas. Those can work too. Clearlight makes one. I know some other manufacturers do, but I would get the Clearlight. And then also there are sleeping bag style ones. I don't recommend them. If you're in the market for a sauna and you want to do this detox program, that's going to be the least effective version. But if that's all you can afford, and if that's all you can fit into your space, then I would say, it's better than nothing. But honestly, if you can afford to buy something a little bit better, I would. Now, the smallest footprint cabin style sauna is made by Sunstream, and I love that little guy. It's called the Sunstream Mini, and it is literally less than 3 foot square. It's
Wow.
32.5 by 35 inches square. Plugs into a standard outlet, and it's only about 67 inches tall, so it comes up to my forehead when I'm standing alongside of it. And there's a video of me actually unpacking and setting up my sauna in that sauna selector guide on my shop. I did a 15-minute, actually, that's how long it took me to build it, but it's an 11-minute video. Anyway,
Wow.
so you can see how that looks built. But anyway, that is a great sauna, and it's also the least expensive cabin style. Right now, I believe Kevin Halsey at Sunstream has that on sale for $25.95 plus maybe 200 in shipping. That's going to be your lowest cost cabin style sauna, and it's a mighty might. I used to have the one that you see in the video. I used to literally take to homes during the COVID lockdowns. I would actually take it to people's homes in the back of my Chevy Tahoe
Wow.
and set it up for them, then teach them how to use it, and then do remote detox coaching. And then after the 30 days, I go pick it up and take it to somebody else's house. And I did that like 7 times during the lockdown period.
Wow.
But after about 7 times, I realized, I got lucky that I didn't break the glass, so I decided to sell it to a friend. But anyway, so that's a great sauna, and if you do, just go straight and call Kevin Halsey at Sunstream. Please tell him I sent you. But wait, that is a great sauna for most people. I would recommend having that over a portable. But again, if you can only fit, or fit into your space or fit into your budget, a portable, the Therasage is the first one, and then Relax would be the second choice.
So ultimately, you're looking at a price tag somewhere from $2,500 or a couple $1,000s to, I know saunas can go well over $5,000, but I think it's important for people to remember that you
Well, they
know
can go much higher than that if you want to
yeah.
go for outdoor 5 person. That's closer to 10 or 11,000 right now. But the thing is there's a sauna for every space. In fact, there's corner units and there's rectangular units, and like I said, look at the sauna selector guide at getdetoxinated.com in the shop, and you'll see what basically is needed to know for buying a sauna. And I definitely am only dealing with the lowest EMFs, and in the case of cabins, no VOCs.
And I mean, at the end of the day, a few $1,000s for the protocol, for all the, vitamins, supplements, whatever else, including the sauna, you just got to think of the cost that you're avoiding with, either you're missing IQ points, your, own health problems, and then future health problems and medical bills that you might have if you don't pursue some of these options.
Absolutely, yes. In fact, I wrote in my book a while back, and I think if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while, but I think it's like $24,000 annually is what the average household pays in just pharmaceuticals.
Wow. Yep. So,
And that's just the average, that's not, let's just call it an average. Anyway, but yes, I actually have
anyways, we're at time here.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, I'll just say that I can show people how to get a sauna and my coaching and everything for even less than $1,000, but you have to build a DIY sauna to do that.
Excellent. Well, Dan, I really appreciate all of your time and information today. It's really an honor to have you on the show. I'm really excited for the future of your program and to see this spread. And happy to do whatever I can to help spread this word, because I think this is a huge thing that people are missing out on. And again, I just really appreciate all the work that you've done to make it so accessible.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with your followers there. And again, I do offer this complimentary consultation at heal.me/detox. So I look forward to talking to you guys. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, please hit the subscribe button and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can find us on Twitter at KWC Pod, on Instagram at Knowledge Without College Podcast. You can find me, Patrick Butler, at Patrick Butler00 on Instagram and Twitter. I encourage you to send over any feedback you have. If there's any guests you'd like to hear on the show, any topics you'd want to hear discussed, I want to know about it. I want to hear your feedback and opinions. So please help me make this a better experience for you. And I look forward to hearing from you. Have an excellent day, and thanks for listening.